Today is part of our big celebration of George Rodrigue, Louisiana's most famous artist. We have a 40-year retrospective of his work on display in the museum. And today we're having a special Blue Dog Day in the Sculpture Garden, Sydney and Walda Besthoff Sculpture Garden, which is a 5-acre facility with 55 sculptures by famous American and European, Japanese, Latin American artists. And we have a beautiful blue dog sculpture in the garden, which is part of our permanent collection. And we thought this would be a great day to team up with the Louisiana SPCA and allow people to bring their dogs on leashes into the garden, see the garden, and also have their dogs photographed in front of the blue dog sculpture.
We're celebrating George Rodrigue. He's probably the most famous, not to mention the most popular Louisiana artist. And then on top of that, we're celebrating the museum and bringing people out to see art. Usually when people go to the museum, it's a very personal experience. You're having a one-on-one interaction with art, but it's also important to bring people out together to have a communal experience and sort of live around art and you know, just enjoy each other's company and celebrate art together as a group.
We want to reintroduce the Sculpture Garden to the people of New Orleans. It's always been a very friendly, user-friendly place to come. Families come here. There's no admission charge to the garden. We haven't in the past allowed dogs in, but today was a special day. And we want just to reemphasize that this is a place for all New Orleanians to come and enjoy art in a beautiful natural setting.
I think the most important thing for people to remember will be the experience of seeing a great artist like George work in person. It's pretty unusual for people to get the opportunity to see an artist of George's stature work in person. Usually they do their work in a studio, but he was nice enough to come out here and actually do a painting demonstration on the stage. And I think that's a really unique experience that people are going to remember for a long time.
He did all of it, but after 3 or 4 semesters, he felt like he had learned all that he really wanted to learn. He wanted to expand his horizons. And through a long series of circumstances, remember you couldn't Google art schools back then, so it's kind of hard to find out what was going on and where you could go to art school. He learned about the Art Center College of Design in Los Angeles. Now it turns out the Art Center was one of the top 2 art schools in the country at the time, still is, very prestigious art school. George did not realize that it was a graduate school. He didn't know much about it, he just knew that he needed to try something else. So he sends his portfolio from USL out to California, and he was accepted. And in fact, he was the first student that Art Center ever accepted who was an undergraduate. George really changed landscape painting in Louisiana. Prior to that time, Louisiana landscapes were painted in a very European sort of tradition, from a bird's eye view, where people were looking from way up high and looking down on the landscapes. You had a big sky and then, you know, tiny little house and trees and river down below. But George said, no, if I'm going to choose the oak tree as my symbol and I am going to graphically interpret my state and show how special and different it is than the rest of the country, then I have to change the way this tree is painted. I have to make it a symbol. So he shoved it forward in the landscape, on the canvas, and he cut it off at the top. And when you look at those landscapes in that first room of the museum, you'll see that. All those trees are cut off at the top, and then the sky is underneath them. So the Aioli dinner is very, very early. It's from 1971, but it does give you a little bit of an idea of what I'm talking about. You see how these trees all go outside of the canvas. That's because George wanted his sky to be underneath so that it showed how different and unique Louisiana was. He painted nothing but oak tree, ground, and sky for about 5 years. The same thing over and over again, those 3 elements. So you got to remember that for George, it wasn't the same thing again and again, because the design is completely different in each one. He can change it design-wise every time. George sometimes will tell you that he's an abstract artist who happens to paint things that you recognize, and that's because the shapes are the most exciting thing for him. So he didn't get bored.
I've been painting since I was in the 3rd grade. I had polio, and I started painting when I was in bed in 1953, and I'm still painting. I think slowly the oak trees in Louisiana, being from Louisiana and looking at these oak trees and coming back from school in Los Angeles, I kept looking at Louisiana in a different way, and I wanted to capture these trees. So I started with the trees, and now I end up with the blue dog. It's my whole life, you know. When you walk through it, it's 40 years of what I've done all my life, and I'm very, very proud of it, naturally. And I'm very proud that people are coming to see it. That's what I'm really proud of, and saw how my whole career progressed, and started with oak trees, and I said, and then now it's all the way to blue dogs, and it explains it. The museum really did a real good job explaining how the transition became possible.
I want them to remember the creativity of George Rodrigue and how important Louisiana artists are to our state and our full recovery.